S.S.S. Lech Lecha. Now we're rolling with the video. We are now getting into the part of the Torah, a very exciting time of the year, as the Friday nights start getting longer and you have more time to learn the Parsha, to go a little bit deeper into the Parsha than when you were in first grade, to try to get a little bit better understanding, to learn from the Avos, Avraham Avinu in this week's Parsha, and soon to come, Yitzchak Avinu, Yaakov Avinu, to learn from the Imois also. Very, very important, heartwarming lessons for every person. And as we know, the Nesivos Shalom always tells us that the Torah is not a history book. And from every word in the Torah and everything that is said about the Avos, there are many lessons to be learned for every single one of us. And one of the things that takes place with Avraham Avinu in this week's Parsha is the episode and the interesting relationship between Avraham Avinu and Lot. Lot, we know, was Avraham's nephew, and the Torah tells us ba'arichas, from the initial traveling and hanging around with Lot, they stayed together until a little bit later in the Parsha, where Avraham Avinu tells Lot, "He pared no me alai." It was nice knowing you. It may still be nice knowing you, and it was nice hanging out together. But he pared no me alai. This is not going to work. Sticking together will not work anymore. And Avraham Avinu said that it was time to break up. That Lot had to go his way, and Avraham Avinu would go his way. So the Nesivos Shalom asks, what is the lesson? As we said, every episode, every word, every pasuk in the Torah is teaching us important lessons. What can we learn from the history of and the relationship between Avraham Avinu and Lot? What can we get from this to raise our level of avodas Hashem? So really what we have to do is we have to look back at the beginning of the Parsha. Hashem tells Avraham Avinu, Lech Lecha, me'artzecha, umi moiladetecha, umi beis avicha. Leave now from your land, from your birth, the place of your birth, beis avicha, from your father's residence. El ha'aretz asher areka, pashut pshat in the pasuk is that you should leave from here. Leave behind everything that you've known, everything you've been connected with. And I want you to go to El ha'aretz asher areka. I want you to go to Eretz Yisrael. And Rashi says, the first words of Rashi in this week's Parsha, Rashi tells us on the words Lech Lecha. Rashi says, Lahanoscha u'letoivascha. Go for your own pleasure and your own benefit. So many Mefarshim, we know the Mefarshim ask, what is the inyan over here of Hashem telling Avraham Avinu to go, Lahanoscha u'letoivascha, go for your own benefit and your own good? We know Avraham Avinu was called Avraham Ohavi. Avraham, the one who showed the most love in the world for HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Avraham Avinu was the ultimate server of Hashem out of Ava. Avraham Avinu loved HaKadosh Baruch Hu so much that, of course, Avraham Avinu was going to do everything that Hashem wanted. Shaloyam manas lekabel schar. Avraham Avinu didn't need any reward. Avraham Avinu didn't need any real incentive. So why here, when it says Lech Lecha, does Rashi tell us right away, you know what Hashem meant? Hashem meant, Avraham Avinu, go for your own pleasure and your own benefit. I promise you lots of good. Why does Avraham Avinu need that incentive? And really, is it an incentive? What do we mean by saying this over here? What kind of hana would Avraham Avinu want other than from the Dvar Hashem? listening to the Dvar Hashem is enough of a hana for Avraham Avinu. He didn't have to be promised anything else. So the Svarim HaKadoshim say that this Lech Lecha is really the first time, right? It's the first time in the Torah that we find Hashem speaking directly to Avram Avinu. And if it's the first time, there's it must be a very, very important lesson that we can learn from this first speaking to Avram Avinu. And Nesivos Shalom tells us that Hashem is telling Avram Avinu in this first conversation how to cut out, how to forge a derech in Avodas Hashem. How, Avram Avinu, are you going to become a person that is Davuk B'Hashem, close to HaKadosh Baruch Hu? And the first thing, Avram Avinu, Hashem is saying the first thing, Avram Avinu, you need to know is Lech Lecha Me'artzecha. You need to know, Avram Avinu, Me'artzecha could be used to tell us a different word other than Me'artzecha, from your land. Me'artzecha could also mean to separate from yourself from all the artzias, from all the gashmias, from inyonim artziyim. Lech lecha me'artzecha. Avraham Avinu, that's the way of avodas Hashem. You have to leave me'artzecha, leave all the inyonim artziyim, the gashmias behind. So too the same. Mimoladatecha, umibeis avicha. These are all things that people are naturally inclined and they're pulled to love. To love. Me'artzecha, mimoiladatecha, mibeis avicha. These are things that a person is pulled naturally to gravitate to and to love. And we're saying here, take all these things and bring them el haaretz asher areka. Put it all into Avos Hashem. Lech lecha. Leave all the personal benefits and desires of Gashmias and things that you naturally love, and take it el haaretz asher areka, to use it for Avos Hashem, for HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And why? Why is this the lesson that Avraham Avinu has to learn now? And why does Avraham Avinu have to leave everything behind? HaKadosh Baruch Hu could have told Avraham Avinu, go to Eretz Yisrael. Why does he have to totally separate himself from every gashmias, from every desire that he had before? The lesson says in Nesivos Shalom is because the two really cannot coexist. The gashmias and the ruchnias, the Avos Hashem, they don't mix. They don't go together. It is not possible for a person who wants to be tied down to Inyonei Olam Hazeh, to the pleasures of Olam Hazeh. It is not possible to be connected to ruchnias too. They're actually a stira to each other. So HaKadosh Baruch Hu tells Avram Avinu, Lech Lecha. And that is lahanoscha uletoivoscha, says Rashi, that the only hana that Avraham Avinu had was from ruchnias. So Hashem said, leave all of that behind. If you want to have that hana, you want to have hana of Avos Hashem, you want to have hana of ruchnias, you need to know that you have to disconnect yourself from the pursuit of all the Gashmi's pleasures. And that is really the lesson for us, that we need to know that the two do not mix. The Chayvus Halavavos tells us in Shar Cheshbon HaNefesh, Perek Gimel, that just like one cannot mix fire and water, so too, the same thing, you cannot mix Hanos Olam Hazeh with Ruchnias. And a person who is indulged in Hanos Olam Hazeh, if that's your goal, if that's your she'ifa, if that's what you want to do, you cannot be a person of Ruchnias. So the Torah tells us, Vayelech Avram, that after Hashem said Lech Lecha, Vayelech Avram ka'asher diber elov Hashem. That Avram went, but what did he go? He went as Hashem told him to do. Avram Avinu, it doesn't just say, Vayelech Avram. Vayelech Avram, he went and he did as Hashem told him to do, that Avram Avinu understood the message and he followed this Shita. But you know, we said at the beginning of the Shir, we were discussing about Lot. You know, Lot also had this tremendous midah of longing for Ava. Lot was Avram Avinu's nephew. He was in his family. Lot also had this desire, this love, this Ava. He had this midah, so much so that he was so alike Avram Avinu in that way that Avram Avinu said, Ki anoshim achim anachnu. Lot, you and I, he said that we're brothers, even though he was only Avram Avinu's nephew. Avram Avinu called him a brother. And they were so alike in that way that they both had this midah of Ava. But they both had this midah of Chesed and Ahava, but the Yetzer Hara of Lot was that he mixed the good with the bad. Lot wasn't ready, as Avram Avinu was, to give up everything, the desires, the love, the want for all things Gashmias. Lot wanted more. Lot wanted the good life of Sodom also. Lot wanted to mix the good with the bad. He wanted to go with Avram Avinu and Avodas Hashem, but he also wanted to live in Sodom with all of its misguided use of Ahava. And we don't have time to go into it right now, but the problems and the midrashim and the things that we know about Sodom came from a warped sense of Ahava, who they stayed with, who they wanted, who they lived with. It was a whole misguided idea of Ahava. So Lot, while he was Achim Anachnu, he was like a brother to Avram Avinu. They both had the same desires of the pursuit of Ava and Chesed, but Lot still wanted to mix the two. He wanted to mix the Toiv with the Ra. And to this, once Lot wanted to do that, because until now Avram and Lot traveled together. They both went and they traveled with Ava and Chesed, but now, once Avram Avinu heard that this is what Lot wants, Avram Avinu turns to Lot and he says, Hipared no me'alai. As good as we are together, and as close as we are as relatives, this is not going to work anymore. That Ruchnius and the Taivas of Gashmius do not work together. They are a stira to Avodas Hashem, and Avram Avinu said, I cannot live under those circumstances anymore. We can't hang out together. So really, what's the lesson to us? The lesson to us, says in Nesivos Shalom, is that we need to understand the Yetzer Hara. Sometimes the Yetzer Hara will tell a person to do something bad, and most people understand that when something's wrong, it's wrong. But what the Yetzer Hara really wants to do is he wants to take something good also and mix bad, to use your good midos, to use it for the wrong reason. And that, the Nesivos Shalom says, that's a lesson in this week's parsha of Lech Lecha, Me'artzecha, Mimoladetecha, Mibeis Avicha, that you have to separate yourself from all these things and the pursuits of Gashmias if you want to continue to elevate yourself and to grow in Ruchnius. And that's the lesson we learn from Avram Avinu, the lesson we learn from his separation, the separation of Avram Avinu and Lot, and it's something that we could all take going forward, that we want to understand that good has to be pure good. We can't allow the Yetzer Hara to mix a little bad into a davening, into a learning, into your midas, into your chesed. We have to try to keep it as pure as we can.